Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the OTAQ investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of the screen. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand over to Phil Newby, CEO, and Matt Enright, CFO of OTAQ. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
You're now live.
This is Phil Newby, so I'll start with the presentation. In the company overview here, we joined the main market on the 31st of March following a reversal into a listed cash shell of Hartsford Capital, and we've now subsequently renamed ourselves OTAQ PLC. We have a very strong track record of trading in niche global growth markets, and we currently have 3 divisions within the business. Aquaculture, offshore and connectors. Our main focus is providing innovative marine technology, products and solutions, primarily for the aquaculture sector. Our core product is Seal Fence, which is a system designed to keep predators away from salmon on salmon farms, either from attacking the salmon or simply swimming too close to cause distress to the fish. We are operating in a rapidly growing market, and we've got great, strong recurring revenues. We will, as time goes on, add new products via an organic growth pattern, and we're also looking to grow the business by acquiring other companies with either key emerging technologies or established products in the technology niche that we find ourselves in. This will also increase our market share, client retention, and diversify some of our revenue streams as we go. We have a strong focus on infrastructure as a service, and there's a little bit more about that explained in the presentation later. So the 3 divisions are listed there in front of you. You can see that we founded the business in 2005. We currently have 36 employees with 4 offices across the 3 divisions. Our offices are in Puerto Montt in Chile, Lancaster, Ulverston in Cumbria and Aberdeen. The business founded in 2005 was an engineering consultancy business, which was originally contracted to design the Seal Fence system for Ocean Tools Aquaculture based in Aberdeen. In 2015, we bought the assets of Ocean Tools Aquaculture and renamed that business OTAQ Limited. Marine Sense, or OTAQ Offshore as we now call it, was an acquisition in November 2018 based around a technology acquisition. We wanted the key technologies within that business and the people responsible for them. Also, that business trades very well in the offshore sector with its niche Ocean Sense leak detection product. In April 2019, we acquired Link Subsea Limited and renamed it OTAQ Connectors. Link Subsea has a diverse range of underwater connectors aimed at the offshore sector, marine, oceanography, defence and commercial diving. We saw an opportunity to take those connectors and offer them into aquaculture, either by including them in our own products or selling them on to other uses as well. And Link also is responsible for the part manufacture of some of our systems. So a slide there about Seal Fence itself. So you can see Seal Fence in the picture on the left-hand side there. The cable that disappears down through the metal grating has the transducer or projector on the end of it. This system is designed to hold sea lions and seals off at about 40 meters away from the salmon farm. It's a modular system, very easy to repair, very easy to restore. It's very robust. It's designed to sit out there in the elements 365 days a year. We tend to deploy these on longer term rental contracts of anything up to 48 months at a time. Should there be an AC power loss on the farm, the system can run for up to 48 hours on battery power. And one of the unique things that we have in this system is an active condition monitoring device that sits above the projector and listens to the projector all the time during transmission and makes sure it's working correctly. The rest of the system also monitors battery condition, whether the system is on and operating, and all of this information can be relayed back to the barge where it can be seen by farm operatives, and equally we can dial in and look at this remotely to make sure all the systems are on and working correctly. An overview of where we are at the moment. So in Scotland, we have over 40% of market share. We're supplying 3 of the largest salmon farming companies in Scotland. In Chile, which is the 2nd largest salmon farming country globally, we have had a presence there in Puerto Montt since 2016 and currently have 142 units deployed with 3 major farming companies again, include one of which is Aqua Chile. We've seen a growth in the use of seal fence, and we hope and expect that it'll follow a similar pattern to Scotland as the system becomes established and used on more farms, that it'll roll out across more companies and more sites within those companies. We're currently in discussions with other large farming companies to talk about multi-site agreements, so rolling more systems out on a flexible contractual basis. In Canada, a key target market, we've had discussions on the East Coast with salmon farming companies, and we would hope at some point this year, when the current COVID troubles are behind us, that we'd get equipment out there on a trial to start developing that market as well. In Australia, there are currently no acoustic deterrent systems due to regulation. We are in discussion with the government of Tasmania about a license for a trial of equipment. We hope very much that that license will be granted later this year and allow us to put systems in on a scientific trial. In Norway, which is the largest producer of farmed salmon in the world, they currently don't use or have very, very minimal use of acoustic deterrent systems. However, we hope that the US Marine Mammal Protection Act implementation in January of 2022 could bring about a change in that. And we'll just have to see how that progresses in the coming months. In Finland, we have a small number of systems sold each year through a distributor, and we're in some shorter term discussions at the moment about establishing a rental model out there in Finland as well.
Thanks, Phil. This is Matt. So this graph just illustrates where we get our recurring revenues from. So this is the seal fence installations and rental revenue graph. The yellow bar is just purely the revenue we get from those seal fence units on long-term contracts or short-term contracts. We also distinguish between where we have the seal fence units at the moment, so the blue chart being the UK, predominantly Scotland, and the orange being Chile. And then the pie chart on the right-hand side, just echoing what Phil was saying earlier about the number of rental contracts on 48-month terms. That's 41% of all our seal fenced assets. The 24-month contracts is 42%, and those that are not contracted are just 17%. And that purely relates to Chile, where we don't have contracts in place at the moment, and a few of the Scottish sites, the smaller customers.
Thanks, Matt. I'm just going to go back to slide 4 because it looks like I skipped over it, which is some of the financial summary. So apologies for that. I'll just move back slightly. Oh, no. So apologies that I don't have that slide in this deck at the moment. So some information on finfish farming here for you all. That it's a global market with great growth characteristics. Finfish farming in total is 138.5 billion annual turnover based on 2018 figures. Salmon farming is approximately 15 billion within that. Commercial salmon farming started in Norway and Scotland in the early 70s. Is now in 16 countries around the world, supplying roughly 2.36 million tons of salmon based again on 2018 figures. Aquaculture it continues to be one of the fastest growing major food production sectors, and we're happy to be in it and in our growth little niche technology sector. Some more information on the market generally. The graph on the top left here shows you the actual difference between captured fish and farmed fish aquaculture production, gives you an indication of growth and need, and the one on the bottom right hand corner shows you the percentage split between farm raised fish and wild caught fish from 2012 figures, with a projection up to 2013 showing that the significant increase in the need for farm raised fish going forward. As I mentioned before, there are 16 locations around the world. This map shows you where the majority of them are, along with the little points of our offices. The table on the bottom left-hand corner here are management estimates of the total number of cages per region, starting from 2017 and 18, moving forward to 22-23. We've added growth estimates each year based on market information, but they are our estimate. The reason that we show you two sets of number there, the top number, total salmon, is the one that's really relevant to all of the seal deterrent systems, and the bottom number, total cages, has a relevance when we talk about some of the other products that we'll bring into market later. So, on the growth strategy, selling more deterrent units into established geographies, which is Scotland and Chile really at this moment, and Finland. So we've gone from 12 units on rent in 2015 to just over 1,100 now by about March 2020. We plan to expand in Chile. We have one multi-site program started in February 2019 and a second multi-site agreement reached in October of 2019. As I mentioned before, we have the application going on in Australia. And in Finland, we've started those conversations about potential rental models. We've sold 25 systems last year into Finland. And as I mentioned also before, Canada, we have conversations ongoing on the East Coast regarding a trial. We are designing and developing new products, one of which is a biomass system and the other is a plankton detection system. We also continue to look to improve the ADD wherever possible as we go, and there's been several iterations of it since the first one's deployed in 2015. We're looking to consolidate our aquaculture data and service niche, again, as I mentioned before, and a little more on that later. And the funds that we raised from the reverse and the placing gives us some capital behind us to continue with our R&D and build more equipment as and when required. So the infrastructure as service, this is sort of mapped out here. The dark blue boxes on the bottom left there are the seal fence system and our IP cameras from the offshore division. The two lighter blue products are ones that are in development and being reviewed at the moment. The grey ones are potential third-party provided equipment. So the idea is that we can draw data from all of these systems, collected in the middle in this cloud-based information system, and then present it to the interested parties across the top in whatever form they want, because not all of those people across the top need the same data. A note on the development of the plankton system. So the idea is to develop an automated system. At the moment, this is done by hand by people going out and collecting water samples and looking at it. Our idea is to reproduce that in an automated way with a piece of equipment sitting in the water column, perhaps moving up and down through it and taking water samples on a regular interval throughout the day, and using machine learning to compare those samples taken against a reference library of good and bad plankton. Sorry, the slide moved on there. Plankton can be a huge problem to fish farmers. In the best case, fish stop eating and they need to stop feeding, and disease can happen following that. Or in the worst case, there's large scale mortality as a result of it. There's currently, as we understand it, no accurate, automatic and cost-effective method of detecting plankton and by type and volume, which is why we think we found a niche here. And we have a grant from the from Census and SAIC to fund the use of the University of Aberdeen's cytometry department to help us out with this here as well. The first area of completing the water sampler, which we have built at the moment and in a first stage form, and are currently testing that up in our office in Aberdeen. Biomass, again, we see there are a number of systems already out there in the market, but as we understand it, there is no current system or method that fulfills everything that farmers currently need. We think we have a way to do that, and at the moment the plankton system and the biomass system are following a similar development path, where we are looking at the use of high resolution stereo cameras along with artificial machine learning to build the first parts of it, and then these projects will effectively part from each other and go their own separate ways to be finished off. The idea with either of the two things that we do here is that we must build it in the same way that seal fence has been built, bottom up, being a very robust system that sits out there and he's happy to work 365 days a year without fault and without breaking down. In terms of Biomass, we've tested the first stereo camera module. We have a collection of imagery that we're now using to look at and start the initial basis of refining the AI system. Matt.
So if I just go through the highlights for the year just gone, obviously we're very proud of these results. It's been a lot of hard work, and we're delighted to announce a 117% increase in revenue to £3.4 million. Still a small amount, but definitely the right direction in terms of where we're going. And that's been mirrored by an increase in gross profits to just under £2 million. The key measure that we're using to judge ourselves is EBITDA, which has grown from £50,000 to £451,000, which is another sort of result we're proud of. And as a result of the placing and the reverse takeover on the 31st of March, we now have net cash of just under £2.9 million, which puts us in a very strong position to achieve the goals and the aims that Phil was talking about in the coming years. So this result's been driven by 47% growth in the aquaculture division, as well as the supplemental revenue from the acquisitions being offshore, which was a full year last year, and the Connectors acquisition in April of 2019. Underpinning all this is the long-term aquaculture rental model that we talked about, so the 48-month and the 24-month contracts we have in place, and this gives us a secure and sound footing for the future growth prospects of the business. In terms of some of the other highlights from the results just announced, you can see there that the 32% growth, and that's purely in the rental model. That's supplemented by the £346,000 in the sales and other associated income. So we don't just have revenue from rentals of the seal fence units, we also have ancillary services that we invoice to account for the 47% growth that I mentioned earlier. The acquisitions are 1.3 million, and that gives the 3.4 million total for the year. In terms of units on rental, we're now just under 1,200, or we were at the end of March 20% growth in the year, which represents solid progress in terms of what we wanted to achieve last year. Although it was slightly curtailed by some difficulties in Chile, it's still the right direction, the right course in terms of where we're going. So in terms of just a brief reconciliation between the statutory EBIT number of a loss of £898,000 back to EBITDA of £451,000, the adjusting items are the share option charge in the year, which relates to the 1.4 million share options in place and the 320,000 warrants. The depreciation on the seal fence units predominantly, so 579, and probably just under £500,000 of that is the seal fence units. IFRS 16 depreciation, which is depreciation on the leased rental units that we have, and then amortization of 191,000. And the amortization is really some of the projects that we've brought to commercialization in the past. They're now being amortized over a 6-year period. So that's the reconciliation. Aquaculture revenue obviously continues to grow based on the number of units on rental, and acquisition revenue accounts for the 38% of the total. In terms of cash flow, we've generated operating cash flow of £865,000 in the year. The capex of £908,000, just under £500,000 of that is seal fence units, with the other £400,000 being intangible assets capitalised during the year. The reverse takeover on the 31st of March gave us an extra £2.6 million in the bank. And the acquisition of Link Subsea in the year was, or OTAQ Connectors, was just under £300,000 net. So in terms of other things that happened, we had a placing on the 31st of March, which raised 1.4 million net of costs. Pre the PLC era, we also had shareholder loans that raised £175,000. They've now all been repaid subsequent to the financial year, so all the shareholder loans are now cleared as of April 2020, to give cash movements of £3.7 million generated in the year. In terms of the balance sheet, I won't dwell too much on this slide, but suffice to say it's now a very strong balance sheet that we have in terms of the context of our business. We've got net assets of £6.2 million, cash, which is slightly flattered at 4.1 million at the end of the year. There were a number of deal costs and the shareholder loans to repay that I mentioned. The key point from that balance sheet is that there's no debt in place apart from some of the deferred payments for acquisitions. The cash position is strong, and it really gives us a sound footing going forwards to sort of spend the cash we need for the assets, for the seal fence units, and also taking advantage of any opportunistic acquisitions that might be in play given the current environment. Phil, do you want to conclude with the outlook?
Yeah. So in conclusion, the outlook: we are building a business of significance within the aquaculture industry. We're aiming to have a range of products with a common infrastructure and a cloud-based information system. We've got growing geographic reach and a product portfolio that will underpin that growth in the medium to long term. We've got a great established client and product base with highly visible revenue streams on longer term contracts. We've got the ability to strengthen this portfolio by acquisition, and so far Aquaculture and Connectors are trading in line with our expectations. The offshore division, which is about 18% of turnover, has a challenging Q1, primarily due to subdued global oil and gas prices and the effect of COVID-19 allowing people to move around. Hopefully that will begin to improve over the rest of the year. Sorry, then the appendices. So a note on the board: we have Alex Hambro as our chairman. Alex has got a great city background and a great aquaculture background. We've got Matt, who's joined us recently as the CFO. George Watt, an experienced city finance director, and Sarah, who's a marine biologist, and myself, that's been with the company since 2014, back when it was an engineering consultancy business. Matt, do you want to do the shareholder split, please?
Yeah, so this just gives a summary of where we are at the moment, and also includes some future issues in terms of shares that we will likely issue going forward. So the current shares in issue are 30.5 million. We've got current options of 1.5 million and warrants of 320,000. The sort of main shareholders are highlighted there. Euro Blue Investments being the principal shareholder at 12%, and Harry Roach being the second biggest shareholder, who's actually the founder of OTAQ Offshore and still with the business, delivering a lot of work in terms of developing the new products.
So a brief note there on the salmon lifestyle and cycle. So you can see that the little bit in blue is the only bit that we're interested in at the point that they're introduced into the sea, and that's the key focus of the products that we currently have and the products that we intend to develop going on. And then and that's us finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Matt. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask you to continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab that's situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review the investor questions that have been submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. And finally, before I hand back to Phil and Matt, I'd like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Matt, Phil, thank you ever so much for the presentation. And of course, investors had the ability to pre-submit some questions, which I proposed to throw at you. And then obviously we've had a number of questions that have been submitted during the meeting itself. So if it's all right with you, I'll kick off with the ones that were pre-submitted, and perhaps I can throw it out for you guys to take where appropriate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, perfect. So the first question here is, who would be your main competitors?
Our main competitors for the seal deterrent system are Ace Aquatech, Gale Force, a Norwegian company called Lofitech, and a company called Genus Wave.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Follow-on question here is, are your products different to others than available, and what makes them different?
We've taken a slightly different view to some of them. Deterrents fall basically into two categories: physiological and psychological. We fall into the physiological category. Some of our competitors are either just psychological or a slight combination of the two. We have some key features within our system that we designed in from the start, such as the longer life batteries, the condition monitoring system, the ability for all of the systems to cross-communicate with each other, and for us to be able to dial in remotely and monitor the systems and see what's actually going on. And we were certainly the market leader in that technology at the time.
Okay, thank you very much. A good question here. Are there any regulations to consider, either new or existing?
There are regulations in certain countries around the world, and they do differ greatly from country to country. In Scotland, for example, fish farms using ADDs are required to request an ADD use license and put in a plan. And this has certainly been the case as long as I've been here, and for many, many years before that is my understanding of it. So they differ in different places. As I mentioned before about Australia, there's currently regulation in place that says you can't deploy a deterrent without first seeking permission and carrying out a scientific trial. And we're in the process of trying to arrange that right now at this moment.
Perfect. And I guess you use an acronym ADD. Did you mind just clarifying what ADD
Sorry,
is?
yes, I always assume everybody knows what that means.
No, it's a
deterrent device.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much for that. Follow-on question here: will the Plankton and Biomass systems generate revenues? When will the Plankton and Biomass systems generate revenues?
As I mentioned earlier, they're very much in the early stages of development at the moment. We estimated both of them would have somewhere between a 21 and 24 month development cycle. We started them really in earnest in about October of 2019, so they do have a way to go. I would hopefully, depending on how well they go, and we may choose to add more resource to bring them to market sooner if that's as they progress and as they do well. But I would expect them to start to be revenue earners approximately 2 years from now.
Perfect, thank you. And the final question that was pre-submitted ahead of today's live event was: what are your key growth drivers over the next 2 to 3 years?
Really to just keep expanding the business as it is at the moment through organic growth and expansion into new geographies, as I mentioned before, and take more of Scotland, more of Chile, hopefully move into East Coast Canada and Australia, and continue developing the Scandinavian market. We'll develop those new products primarily aimed at aquaculture, but there may be some things developed for offshore as we go. We're currently also designing a new range of underwater connectors that could be used in many sectors, and hopefully an acquisition or two along the way.
Perfect. So of course we've got a couple of questions I think that have just been fired in. I don't know who, if any, wants to address those, but perhaps if I could ask you to read out who they're from, followed by the question and then the response, that would be great. Thanks ever so much.
So we've got a question here from Nick J. Does the current environment offer any near-term acquisition opportunities? The answer to that is I'm sure there will be. We haven't seen any at the moment, or nothing too obvious at the moment, but I'm sure as time goes on through this year, a couple or more may present themselves to us, and we'll treat each one on the merits as and when they arrive.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there is anything else there. Of course, anything that we don't get a chance to review here, we can always review post the presentation.
Yeah, there's another question here from Nick J as well, which is what is your renewal rate on your recurring revenues? And so far we've had 100% renewal in Scotland.
Thank you. Again, I don't know if there's anything else that's left there for you guys. As I say, if not, we can always revisit them. If investors do have any further questions, obviously, please do submit them. If not, what I'll probably do, Matt and Phil, is hand back to you just with the opportunity to perhaps just wrap up. Obviously, the Outlook slide is up there, giving, I guess, the Outlook moving forward. But if you want to wrap up, and then what I'll do is I'll divert all callers and investors back to give you feedback?
Yep, just so in summary, I explained the outlook to everybody before on that slide. We've got a great business here. We've got a good client base in Scotland and in Chile and in Scandinavia. There's a lot going on in the business. There's a lot going on technically in development terms, and we aim to sit ourselves very much in that niche technology market for aquaculture. We've got a great team of people here working with us, and we hope to just continue to build on this in the years to come.
Many thanks. Phil, Matt, thank you very much for updating investors today. Obviously, as we said, a copy of the recording along with the slides and the published Q&A will be available on the Investor Meet Company dashboard. Investors will receive a notification when that is available. In the meantime, could I ask investors not to close this session, as you'll be rediverted for the opportunity to provide feedback. If you access this meeting from our website, the feedback page will appear. If you logged in using the link, then simply log back into the platform and the feedback page will be available for you. On behalf of the company, thank you very much for investors for attending today. That concludes today's session. Thank you once again.